once again for my weekly video. I'm not going to talk about my book progress. It's pretty much the same what it was last time. I know I'm such a slacker. Not really much else to talk about, but I do have a new mystery for you, and that's why we're here. It's a little different this time. The case of Jack the Ripper, because it's Halloween season, folks. So, what better way than to get in the holiday spirit with a little murder, shall we? So this is going to be a little different in the sense that I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, and I'm also not going to give you theories. I'm going to give you the suspects. I'm going to give you the list of the victims that were killed, give you a brief rundown if you don't already know it, and if you don't, you probably live under a rock, because everyone's heard of Jack the Ripper. So basically, yeah, this video might be a little shorter than most. It might be longer than most. I really don't know. We'll see how it goes. Like my haircut, like my shirt. All right, get that out of the way. The case of Jack the Ripper. In a nutshell, we all know, if you haven't, again, you might live under a rock. 1888 in London, Whitechapel, a series of murders took place between August 31st and November 9th. 5 women that we know of were brutally murdered, found in different spots of Whitechapel, just murdered in just the most gruesome way possible, which was to suggest that the person behind it was a mastermind. They were a surgeon. They had some kind of knowledge of removing organs and just destroying bodies. I probably shouldn't use the word destroyed, but mutilated. There we go, mutilating bodies. So obviously, to this day, we don't know who Jack the Ripper was. Are there theories on who he was? You bet. There's a ton. There's so much that when I did my research, I could have been researching for perhaps the next 5 hours. That's how much it was. It was crazy. Here's what we do know. There are a few suspects whose names that I mentioned you might recognize them. These are the notorious suspects. There's 8. I have 8 suspects listed. That's 8 out of a possible God knows how many. So, with that being said, basically, let's get to the first part, shall we? Who were these 5 women? Well, Jack the Ripper was known for these rippers. He was known for these murders because they were prostitutes, women, of the night around that time of Whitechapel, and I believe most of them were prostitutes. Some of them, maybe a couple weren't out of the 5. Again, I'm not really pretty sure they all were, or some of them might have worked at local establishments in the area as well. So again, what we know: Whitechapel, London, 1888. Between August 31st and November 9th, 5 women were brutally murdered. These 5 women, in no particular order, although maybe they are in order. I don't know. I just took it from where I found it. Mary Ann Nichols, Anne Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Those were the 5 people that were murdered. Now, I'm actually familiar with at least 4 of the names because again, I mean, I'm not a Jack the Ripper nut, but I've done my research. The story has always intrigued me since I found out about it a long time ago. And I actually wrote a small short story on how I believe in the third murder of Elizabeth Stride, Jack the Ripper was actually almost caught by police in an alleyway. Of course, he escaped, but I actually had read research and I did details on that, and it's because of this almost being caught that I actually wrote the story. Of course, I fictionalized it a little bit, but yeah. So I have a little firsthand research of knowledge on Jack the Ripper in that regard. Um, Again, I don't expect you to know the 5 victims' names, but again, they might be familiar if you're familiar with the whole Jack the Ripper case. So again, Mary Ann Nichols, I believe, was the first victim. Anne Chapman was the second. Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Now, the interesting thing about Elizabeth Stride was I believe she was the one that got right in the throat. She got a throat slit, but also it was the most like gruesome because I believe that was when he started removing organs. Like, no, no, thank you. Um, but he got more gruesome as the murders went by. I mean, I'm not saying that they were all like pretty brutalized, like seriously. Um, and I guess at three, at the third victim, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes at four, and Mary Jane Kelly at five, assuming those are the orders of which they got murdered, those were probably the most gruesome. I believe the third and fourth, like the police, I believe I actually read somewhere, I read an article that one of the police officers just like broke down and just walked off the scene because the sight was so horrendous. I mean, I can't imagine being like, coming across a body like that, not knowing who did it, and just putting it all together and just coming up with nothing. So, Jack the Ripper, of course, is notorious because that happened in 1888, and here we are in 2020. You like how I always like to connect the years that things happened to the time we're living in now, just because a lot of these mysteries and gruesome murders, they took place so long ago, and we still have no freaking clue who did it. Or in this case, we have like an alias, Jack the Ripper, but we don't know who's behind the name. We don't know who did it. Suspects. Now, I'm not going to sit here for the next 5 hours and read you like 100 suspects. That would be insane. I took the first couple ones that I saw. There actually are a few names in here that I actually recognize based off of watching shows, documentaries, and even reading up on it. So, and also, again, I'm going to read these names to you. I'm basically going to give you their name, their description, or basically the type of person that they were and why they were a suspect. I'm not going to give you theories as to who I think did it. I'm only going to give you theories as to who I think did it based off of the people that I actually do recognize from seeing their names before. So here we go. The first one is Montague John Druitt. He was a schoolmaker. And the thing that's interesting about Montague John Druitt is that while he was a suspect, he actually died by drowning in December of 1888. So just think about that for a minute. The murders took place from August 31st to November 9th. That means that if John Druitt was actually the Jack the Ripper, that means that he pretty much got away with it because he ended up drowning a month later after the fifth murder. I don't really have much on. I mean, again, I could have read up on all of these people, but I'd be here forever. So, uh, Suin Kowalski, aka George Chapman, no relation to Anne Chapman. They made that thoroughly clear. Um, he was a he actually poisoned three of his prior wives, and he went under many of other assumed names. I can see how they could have. I could really see how they could think this guy was a possible suspect. Although poisoning and butchering a body are probably two completely different things. Like, yeah, they're killing a person, but like, I feel like there had to be more to it than aliases and poisoning three ex-wives for him to be considered as a suspect to be Jack the Ripper. The third name is Aaron. I'm sorry if I butcher these names. Aaron Kozinski, and that's actually one of the names I've seen in many documentaries, and I've actually read in articles of Aaron Kozinski being Jack the Ripper. He was in Whitechapel around the time. He was a shady character at times, and police had actually brought him in, I believe, a week prior on another crime. So then when Jack the Ripper started murdering people, they were like, wait a minute, like this is similar to a guy, like the character of a person. They're like, didn't we have a guy in this like a week ago in here, like very similar? So I think Aaron Kozinski was brought in by police and questioned many times, but there was nothing substantial to connect him to being Jack the Ripper. Although his name is still floated around today as being a possibility. Another one is Michael Ostog, Ostrog. The reason Michael Ostrog is interesting is he's a former Russian surgeon. Now, obviously, in order to be Jack the Ripper, you must have substantial surgical experience. The first three, I mean, I was looking for it. I didn't see it. I think Aaron Kosminski does have surgical experience, although it wasn't what I read. But Michael Ostrog is a former Russian surgeon. So, although I kind of missed the connection here between him being in Russia and then in London, but the fact that he had surgical experience would definitely make him a candidate. John Pizer, he was a bootmaker. He was, I believe Jack the Ripper also had an alias called a Leather Apron, and I guess because Pizer was a bootmaker, he worked with Leather Apron. And it was a weird connection, but John Pizer, I believe I've sort of heard his name before, but not as substantial as Aaron Kosminski. This one I actually recently came across. I actually saw this in a documentary, and then I actually came across it on here. Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Avondale. This guy's a freaking prince, and he was accused of being Jack the Ripper. It's said that the Duke of Avondale, Prince Albert Victor, he had around that time. I guess he had a very weird personality. He had dark traits and hobbies, if you will. Take take that how you want. Um, but there was a few weird things about him that pointed out to the fact that he was actually around in Whitechapel around the time of the murders of Jack the Ripper. But to think that a prince, like a royal duke, could be for Jack the Ripper is just that was probably scandalous back in the day. Like imagine accusing royalty of being a murderer today. Like that's I'm not even gonna go there because it's so insane. Joseph Barnett, I don't have very much on him, but he's another name that many people have suggested as to being Jack the Ripper. Um, I believe again he was connected to let's see, Joseph Barnett. I believe was actually the tenant of he lived with one of the last two victims, which is implied. Like obviously, if he killed her, then he must have also killed the other four. But there's discrepancies in there. The last one, I'm not even kidding. I'm not kidding you with the last one. Just recently heard about this one just before I came on here. Lewis Carroll was once accused of being Jack the Ripper. If you don't know who Lewis Carroll is, you might know his work, Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, I thought that was pretty crazy. Most people write this one off, but there's like two, I guess, very vague um ways in which Lewis Carroll was Jack the Ripper. One, the fact that he had a nervous breakdown at age 12, and then he had another nervous breakdown around the time of the Jack the Ripper murders. And I believe he was in the area, maybe not in Whitechapel specifically, but he was around in the area during the time of Jack the Ripper. That's absolutely crazy. So, I mean, and obviously that's the first time I came across it. So it's absolutely preposterous that Lewis Carroll, the writer of Alice in Wonderland, could be Jack the Ripper. But yeah, again, I'm not going to give you a rundown on who all the people that I think did it. Actually, I will. I just won't do all eight. Aaron Kosminski, because his name keeps coming up in documentaries and articles that I keep seeing, I think he's a possible suspect. Um, and Joseph Barnett, I think is a possibility. And then I think John Pizer. And there might also be another guy in there. Um, my conclusions on this, the Jack the Ripper murders, they were brutal. They were unfortunate. They shouldn't have happened. And to this day, like we're all like enamored with like finding out who the heck Jack the Ripper really was. Was he a young guy? Was he an old guy? Was he a woman? Some people have suggested that Jack the Ripper was actually a woman. I'm not saying that that's not possible because like oh like but this is like a one time you kind of like I don't know. Well, I mean, what am I trying to say? I don't think it was a woman. I'll be blunt about it. I don't. The only connection here would be the fact that, like, oh, I don't like the fact that women are parading around as prostitutes on the streets of Whitechapel. I'm going to do something about it. I mean, other than that, what possible evidence could you possibly make on, you know, it being a woman? Um, so yeah, like basically, I think it was either Aaron Kosminski, Josh Barnett, Joseph Barnett, excuse me, John Pizer, and there's another guy in there. I actually think Jack the Ripper was like an older guy. Um, although Kosminski, I believe, was like middle aged. I don't think it was a young guy. I think it was either a middle aged guy or like an old, like a, semi old guy. I'm not talking like an 80-year-old guy with like walking with a cane being Jack the Ripper. I'm talking, like mid aged, semi old, a guy with knowledge, a guy that was a surgeon, a guy that knows the Whitechapel area. Like these are all key things. And the funny part is, out of all these eight suspects, they all have some of these traits. Some of them know the area. Some of them have surgical experience. Some of them have, knowledge of, arteries, organs, not necessarily surgical work, but they have doctoral, expertise. But not a lot of them have all three, which is the most baffling. So, so yeah, this was my video on Jack the Ripper. I would love to get your thoughts on people that either people on this list that I've mentioned or people that you've come across. Who do you think Jack the Ripper was, and how many people do you think he murdered? Do you think he murdered more than five? I think he did. I just think that these five are probably the most like most well known. I think he maybe murdered like 10 people, 10 or 12. But yeah, this has been my video on Jack the Ripper. Um, I might be back on Friday. If I'm not busy after work, I might pop up on here and do a nice creepy pop-up video. But yeah, until then, this has been my video on the case of Jack the Ripper.